Hello everyone, welcome to this exclusive masterclass session, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to our today's speaker. Don Rapier, widely known as Juliuss, is a 23-year-old content creator currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. After being diagnosed with bipolar disorder type 1 in 2018, Juliuss revamped his YouTube channel, Juliuss Creates, for the purpose of sharing stories, guidance, and personal experience on mental health and mental illness. Having lived with the mental illness for the majority of his life, first being diagnosed with depression and ADHD, Juliuss has focused on his personal mental health and recovery since the age of 4. It is his belief that our personal and communal stories are essential in the fight to dismantle the stigmatization of mental illness. And in just 2 years, Juliuss has had the privilege to speak to an audience of over 200,000 global community members on issues ranging from bipolar recovery to medication changes to working through severe anxiety. Juliuss, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so this summit is all about relationship and anxiety, and I see tremendous value in your story on living with bipolar disorder and experiencing ADHD and depression and going through relationships with other people. So can you please tell us a little bit about your story?
Of course. So in terms of YouTube, I really only started it just 2 years ago. But with mental illness and with mental health, it's been a lifelong battle. When I was 4, that's when I started seeing my first therapist. So I saw her at the time. I didn't really know she was a therapist. I didn't know what therapy was or anything. But that's when my parents sort of started me down that path, just because of some different traumas in my childhood that happened prior to when I was 4. I was moved around a lot, and then especially throughout my childhood, just different instances, a lot of them relating to family attachment, or the lack of family attachment, and just preparing for what I'd be going through now. They didn't know about the bipolar disorder or anything then, but they were sort of just preparing me. So since the age of 4, I've been trying to work through different issues that I've been having. A lot of them relating to anxiety, a lot of them, perceptions of how I'm thinking. So it wasn't until I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder where it was almost an epiphany all of a sudden of sorts. I was kind of just like, why am I not talking about this to everybody, but, I was covering or making up stories for missed classes in college, canceling on friends, but having to come up with these crazy stories that, I always got by with. But it was like, I'm okay letting people think all of these stories, but I'm not okay with them just knowing that, I'm going through hard times. And it felt strange to me. It got to the point where I just couldn't even do it anymore, and I didn't want to do it. And I couldn't imagine, what other people must be going through, who were also, newly diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I didn't know a lot about it. There wasn't a lot of information around it, in terms of real honest information, like what does a manic episode look like, or how do you, severe anxiety, how do you work through it? When I Googled that or tried to research it, it gave, for lack of a better word, shallow answers, or shallow results. So I would say inspirational things, which are great, but it didn't acknowledge how terrible I was feeling at the time. So that's why I started the YouTube channel, in the sense to help people, help the kid who's in the middle of Nebraska in a town that has 100 people, who just has no clue about anything what's going on with them. How do you help those people besides, share your own experiences and how you're working through things?
Okay, and so growing up and going through your first relationships, what was your experience? How was bipolar disorder affecting you within that relationship?
Yeah, so that's interesting, because I'm still going through those problems today. I'm still working through. They're different, but they're still there. I think the first relationships really, I mean, maybe obviously or not so obviously, were around family and friends. I think that there are a lot of things I look back on now, that I didn't have the understanding. I didn't know I was bipolar. I didn't know I had really any mental illness until middle school, like officially was diagnosed. But I noticed my behaviors with my friends, how they were, sometimes either to the extreme where I would feel, an emotion to the extreme, whether that's anxiety, whether that's sadness, whether that's a feeling of being abandoned. I think that's like the biggest one right there. I would have these feelings, but they would be over, um, like what people would consider to be minor, minor setbacks. So if a friend canceled on me, it would feel like as though, they just said they didn't want to be my friend anymore. So that was a large part of growing up as a kid. And I thought I had no idea that that wasn't a normal feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I also didn't have the understanding to look that deep within and understand all of those emotions. I just knew that at the time, connecting with people was hard, and not just hard, but I felt that I didn't trust people at the end of the day. I think I was always thinking I'm going to be alone in life. This is just like how life is. I can't wait until like the next phase of life so that I can move on. It was always moving towards the next one, not really working with, I was working with my therapist, but not really doing the work, not the way I'm doing it now, which is, I think, a large reason why the problems, come back up now as an adult, for the last 5, however long it's been. Um, and I've started to realize, like, oh, these issues haven't gone away. I just, like, as a kid, just didn't know how to deal with them, or as in high school, like, I didn't have the understanding.
Right. So, in your particular case, your relationship and anxiety, was it more related to fear of rejection when it comes to approaching people, or fear of abandonment that they will just break up with you? So, what was it more in your situation?
I think it's, honestly, it's a mixture of all of that. I think as a adolescent, a lot of it was abandonment. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
it was fear of abandonment. My birth mom, she was very in and out of my life. She also suffered from mental illness and bipolar disorder. So there would be some times where she would just, not be there, not just disappear without saying like, I'm doing this, or there's no sign. She would say like, I'm coming to get you for the zoo this weekend, and then I wouldn't see her for a year. So there was things like that, that then manifested within, again, like I said, my friends, if they canceled plans, that was a huge one. Especially, I would latch on to a friend if they became like a best friend. I would latch on to those people significantly as though they were my mother figure. And every single thing that they did, if it was, no matter how small, no matter how much they were trying, it just wasn't good enough. Like they had to be, at least at that time, I wanted it. And I wouldn't have admitted that then. I wanted them to be there for me 100%, because if they weren't there, it would feel like they didn't care about me, and that I was being abandoned. And that if they really did care, they would do everything in their power that they can. Obviously, now understanding that you can't expect that from people, and that there's, definitely balances there. Um, Looking towards the future, or not future, I guess, more so present. Obviously, it's become more about relationships, romantic relationships, and I think that is something that I am still working on now. Is that I don't completely understand, at least in real time, what's going on or how I'm feeling. I understand now how to reflect more on it, but I'm still working on. Is this a real thought that I'm having, or is this a, learned response, conditioned response from childhood? And a lot of times, and then you add in the bipolar factor, which, that's just the attachment in, the trauma piece. The bipolar, if I'm not stable and with my moods, if I'm manic or if I'm depressed, that also greatly affects, my behavior as well. So it's really trying to now figure out, the comorbidity, I guess, between the different illnesses and how they interact on a spectrum rather than like they're separate entities.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so, for those people who has bipolar disorder, and they want to have a relationship, a romantic relationship, intimate relationship with their partners, and they're struggling because of, let's say, ADHD, because of depression, because of manic attacks, and what was your experience? What helped you to manage that? uh, Maybe others, maybe there's a perception shift that happened and that made a change, or maybe there's some techniques that or tools that you used on yourself that really helped. So can you share a little bit on that, please?
Yeah, of course. I think that it goes right back to the basis of why I revamped my YouTube. I think before I had a YouTube channel since 2015. I did mostly comedy things that weren't close to me. But when I revamped it, it became almost, I wanted to be as genuine as possible, as authentic as possible, as honest as possible. And that's sort of how I approach my relationships. I think that I do have severe anxiety, and I will have panic attacks. You know, I used to have them 4, 5, 6 times a day, and it got to the point where I literally could not live life that way. So it's so much no more of a relief now that I just kind of blurt out what's going on in my mind, or what's, like what's going on with me in terms of relationships. It's very uncomfortable, and I haven't completely mastered it yet. And a lot of people are actually off, like, they're kind of shaken by like my honesty in a sense. I would say it's honest in the sense it's not rude, but it's more so, hey, I have really severe anxiety, so I'm just going to tell you like how I feel. I preface it that way, and then I explain to them the dynamic in which they're creating this feeling inside of me. A more concrete example could be that I think I talk about this in one of my series. Um, I was confused as to whether or not I was having real solid feelings for somebody, or if it was the manic. I call it the manic energy, or if it was the mania or the chemicals, that were kind of messing with, maybe my feelings or my perceptions and my feelings of somebody. So obviously, dating someone for a month or two and then telling them, hey, like, I'm not really sure if I like you or not, but I'm trying to figure it out. That's a very awkward conversation. It's a very, it could have gone, extreme. I mean, and I wouldn't have blamed them either. It could have gone south. It could have gone really wrong. But at that time, I'm freaking out myself. I'm having panic attacks over this. And the only person I can share it with is really that person. And it's either they understand, and if they don't understand, it sucks a lot, and it's so much easier said than done. But I mean, it got to the point where I can't live my life with that person. Then if they can't talk openly, honestly about it, because that's all I know how to do now. Like it's like, I guess it's that piece. It's that I have no idea how else to confront it without just saying it. And it definitely sets people off a little bit. They're like, oh, that's very just blunt, but I respect that. And I think it really gets down to like how I can work through it. I say like, I don't want to feel this anymore. So how can I fix this? Like, these behaviors. How can we work through this so that I don't have panic attacks? Because I hate panic attacks.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And one of your videos, in one of your videos, you mention um, needing space, relationship anxiety, and needing space. So, what was your experience? Because not everyone will understand that. Well, that's actually normal, regardless if whether someone's having a bipolar disorder or not. That sometimes we just need space and we need just to be alone. That's totally fine for anyone. But with, I assume that with for someone who's having a bipolar disorder, there is maybe like additional fear of what if they don't understand my need for that I need just more space for another 2 weeks or maybe a month. So, and how was your experience with just explaining that you need space?
Yeah, so it's actually, I believe, I'm not, I may have a couple of videos on that one, but I know I've definitely said it to a couple of people this past year or two. So that's always a very interesting conversation. And unfortunately, working on, I'm still working on that. I think, sorry, I lost my train of thought. This is a perfect example as to what were we talking about?
We were
Sorry.
about communicating that you need space in
Oh,
relationships.
yes. Okay. So when I talk about needing space, I think that I try to convey to the person that I'm dating at the time, or the person, that I'm involved with at the time, that it doesn't, it's not necessarily, it's not a bad thing. If anything, I mean, it might result in a negative outcome of us, maybe not being as close or being together. But I think that reflection is extremely important. And I think being honest with them and saying like, hey, I have bipolar disorder, and I have severe anxiety. I have post-traumatic or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I have these things. They're not going away. Um, if I continue down this road, people are going to get hurt, emotionally, um, regardless of some way. So taking a step back and really making sure that I feel the way I feel, or I feel the way I feel for certain reasons, is beneficial in the long run. And again, I think it comes back. I mean, so far it's all been received pretty well. I mean, I've had, all those relationships did not work out in the end. Um, but I also don't expect those people to fully understand. They're open to understanding, they're open to listening, but I don't fully understand it. So I can't expect them to, jump on the bandwagon and be like, okay, I'll wait for you, or I'll help you through this thinking process, because there really isn't an answer. So I think it comes. That's why I've sort of now realized, I'm not necessarily taking a break from it, but I'm sort of doing more self discovery. I think that, again, just being honest with the person and kind of having an open conversation. And I do a lot of prefacing it that, I don't exactly know what I'm saying. I'm trying to work through this. I don't really know what's going on. Can you just sit here with me and kind of just talk it out? Because so much opens up when you just talk genuinely, no arguing. If you can just say what's on your mind without fear, 'cause that's another big piece for me. Fear of what the person will say. I used to be afraid that if I tell this person something they don't like to hear, they'll get angry and then they'll leave. And that's still a reaction that I get all the time. Sometimes, most times, involuntarily. I don't even realize it. That's where that comes from.
Okay, okay. And you also mention sometimes in your videos attachment trauma and how that affects relationships. So can you please tell us more what is attachment trauma and how it affects relationships?
Yeah. So attachment disorder, or attachment trauma. There's so many different names from it, but that realm relates to, in my understanding of it, at least, is that there's certain instances, and I suppose it can happen um, at different stages of life. But for me personally, from age 0 to 4, one of the most, if not the most important critical time for human development, in terms of attachment. And you're supposed to attach to a mother figure and develop those critical foundational relationships. That was absent for me. So I didn't, my mom was there, but she was in and out of my life. I was switched around households, and it was never like I was on the street or anything, or that I was still very fortunate, but it's still that key relationship piece. So I had all of the abstract things there. I had a house, I had parents, so to say, but I didn't have that care at that age. Sorry, I forgot
No,
what we were
no,
talking about.
yeah. So attachment trauma. So that's where it comes from. It, it, in your case, it comes out of your relationships or lack of connection with your mother, right?
Yes, yes, that's what it was. It's a lack of connection with my mom growing up. Plus, I didn't my birth father as well. I didn't really see him a lot, and I think there was a lot of conflict between them. My mom's side and dad's side as a kid that I was kind of put in the middle of. It was
Mhm.
a custody battle and a whole bunch of stuff. And then my birth mom, ended up passing away. So that was another trigger. And then I had a best friend who was like a sister to me, passed away shortly after that. So it was a combination of all of these things that led to a obviously a breakdown for me, that I came to realize all of these things. But within all of that, I've noticed that in my mind, the way I've positioned it is that people leave and people always leave. And in high school, it was the feeling that people are not around for a very long time, because in my experience they hadn't been. So without that foundational experience, now that I have relationships, I don't want people to leave, and it's hard for me to either get attached to people because of that fear, or I get too attached and I latch on, and it becomes unhealthy and toxic, um, and to the point where I become that person who's toxic, which is obviously not a good thing. Um, what was I gonna say? That was, oof, that was. Oh, another key piece to it that I found now is that a lot of it actually is involuntary. So there's things that I would love to do prevention on this, but a lot of my behaviors sometimes or my feelings I'm reflecting on. So all of this now is a reflection of the last few months or the year, and I've realized, like, okay, this might be a me issue, and that I don't even realize that when someone says um, there's certain whatever there's certain dynamics within relationships that I realize that I don't fully comprehend or understand. Like genuinely, when someone says, "How was your day? What did you do today?" Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't, and it's a very weird feeling. I don't understand why we explain that because I personally just don't like. I mean, for lack of a better like phrase, I don't care. And that's not a. I've come to realize that's not a normal thing. Apparently, that I've people like to share about their days, especially with people that they care about. But that was something even now, like in relationships, I don't ask or I don't care to ask. And if they ask me, I'm always just like, why do you need to know about like what happened in my day? And it's instances like that really kind of not weaken that make the relationship fragile in the sense that it's simple behaviors that you would it's not grandiose mental breakdowns, depression. It's just the simple interactions that I don't kind of always understand because I didn't have that as a child. Um, so that connectiveness is just not there. I'm trying to build it now, but it was never there from the foundation. So it's interesting to sort of be working backwards.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for sharing that. And so, for those people who are interested, so they have a person in their life who has a bipolar disorder or some mental illness, and so this person want to create relationships, that want to date this person with bipolar disorder. What recommendations can you give? What should person like this person be aware of when starting a relationship with someone with a mental illness?
I think it's it definitely depends. But I think in the spirit of being that authentic and honest self of or being my authentic and honest self, um, it's something that has to be considered and thought about pretty like heavily. I think that especially now that my relationships, in high school or whatever, those relationships, I had them and they were important for that time period, but they weren't serious, life impacting relationships, with marriage and kids and finances and all of that. So with having that consideration in my mind, I think that it really is a conversation that an open conversation that's important to be having. How with that other person, the people I've been dating, I've told them, when I'm manic, these are the signs of me being manic. These are the signs of me being depressed. When I'm manic, I don't want to hear that I'm manic. I don't want to hear anything that they're saying. I'm not really, my full self, and that's a very scary thing for most people. It's a scary thing for me. It's also a very, very, very serious issue. That's people can want to be there for you, but not everybody can be there for you. Slash, it's not necessarily their responsibility up to a certain point. So I think that there's a delicate balance, and it's definitely a case by case scenario. But I think that with something like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, severe anxiety, things where it has a significant impact on your life, it's it's not a good thing to live as though you're not living with the disorder or the disability. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to embrace that you have it. Um, but I think that once you understand that this is something that you're living with, you understand that this is impacting things. You're not trying to run from it. You can then tackle it head on and say like, "Hey, I do have bipolar disorder, um, so I'm going to let you know like the best way to help me. This is what I'm going through. This is like me being completely honest so that you can actually work on those issues because then they come back up and they'll just keep coming back up and you'll keep repeating the same things. That's a big piece for me in the sense that I'm tired of dealing with mental illnesses. I'm tired of dealing with all of it. So I mean, there's obviously a process and I understand that. But I just want, like, I would much rather talk it out with somebody than have it come back up. And I'm like, oh, we're talking about this a few months and now it's another issue or it's the same issue over and over again. I it's almost an annoying feeling. So I think that's my biggest advice is that, some relationships, people just can't take it. And it sounds really harsh because it's like, oh, well, if you love somebody, you'll do anything for them. No, that's not the most healthiest. That's not the healthiest thing, especially for other mental illnesses and bipolar disorder. You don't want to enable that person as well. So there's been times where, I'll say I'm not manic or I'm completely fine and I'm not completely fine. And I'll kind of twist the scenario in my favor, And then if I don't let the person know that I do that, then they would never know and they would never question, some of my answers. And that's really hard to admit to somebody, as a person with bipolar disorder, there might be times where I am a little bit deceiving or where I'm like not myself. They're not frequent anymore because I've gotten a pretty good handle on it. But honesty really is, as they say, honesty is the best policy. It really is key to a healthy relationship, I think, because if your partner, whoever they may be, doesn't understand the full you, then there are times where you'll escape that because you're just naturally, I don't want to say used to hiding, but you're not used to just providing information and having someone come to you and be like, okay, I understand that. I understand how hard that must be, but I'm here with you.
Yes, that's great. So what I hear from you that what's important is honesty, transparency, authenticity, acceptance, trust, and respect for what this person is going through, right?
Correct. And I mean that you've hit the nail on the head right there. I will say that obviously it's easier said than done. Like I can say, like, be honest with your partner about everything, and then I understand that it's not that easy. I mean, I'm still, again, like I say, I'm still working on these things, and I'm not anywhere near completely mastering it. There are certain things that I don't want to share, or that I've neglected to share. But getting closer and closer to being my full authentic self with somebody, no matter how scary it is much better than the alternative. I think a lot of times, if I haven't actually been manic that many times, but if I'm having like a hypomanic or if I'm more elevated than normal, there have been many times where I have just gone off and I could just do whatever I want to do. Sorry, I lost my train of thought again.
Yeah, no,
This hasn't happened in a while.
yeah, yeah, it's all good. And so for those people who is experiencing bipolar disorder, and can you share with them what are the tools or maybe perception shifts that helped you the most to stop it in the moment when it's being triggered, and also what helped you in the long term to how to deal with it, to manage it? Because for some people there's specific techniques. Some people they say that meditation helped them tremendously, breathing exercises. So can you share what worked for you to manage bipolar disorder?
Yeah, I would say that I started thinking about mental health and my mental wellness and my disorders holistically. So it's not. I used to think, especially in middle school, being diagnosed with depression, ADHD, it really was presented to me as a simple fix. You take the antidepressants and you take like your Adderall or you take your stimulant for ADHD, and that's what you do to solve it. And it wasn't until obviously I had I say breakdown. I'm not sure if that's the correct term. I had an episode. That's the correct term. I had an episode at the end of senior year in high school, and I had to go into a partial hospitalization program to work on these things. And it was my realization there that, it isn't just taking the pills and you're good and you're fine. It's a combination, a personal combination that, you kind of have to discover for yourself. Oops.
Yeah.
Here we go. Sorry. It's a personal, it's a personal journey, personal recovery plan that you have to discover for yourself that's more holistic. So for me, it's been really centered around therapy. So I was actually on bipolar medication up until the spring, and then I stopped, mostly just because I was having really bad side effects. But it was then that I also realized that my bipolar disorder and my attachment trauma and that disorder, they kind of go hand in hand in the sense that um, if I'm feeling distressed about something that's in because of a trauma that I've experienced, whether I know it or not, that's perfect to trigger behaviors that can then trigger a manic episode. So really looking at therapy rather than just medication, because I mean, lithium, it worked. It worked especially, for the extremes. If I'm just in psychosis and I have no idea, I'm not myself at all, or if I'm just at my lowest of lows, medication is awesome. I love it. It helps people. But the therapy piece has helped me tremendously, almost, I would say, more in the sense that lithium didn't fix me. I was still having issues with relationships. I was still having anxiety. It was lessened, but it just didn't make it better. It wasn't until then that I kind of came to the realization that, okay, therapy and working on these behaviors, and like initiating like certain specific acts that I need to do or goals for myself, like you will talk to this person about this week, or you will not, send this letter because you have anxiety, but you will at least put the letter out on the table and put the paper and then maybe think about it. Small things like that get to work up help a lot as well. I think that another huge thing, especially with bipolar disorder, is diet. I've come to realize now that I maybe binge sugar more than the average person, and that's actually a biological reason for that. In that sense, that it gives me a pleasure, and it's typically when I'm in like a manic episode, it gives me that quick energy that I like. So focusing on my diet and what I eat, I don't eat a lot of sugary foods, and if I do eat sugary foods, it's natural sugar. It's not like processed sugar. I can feel a difference in my body in terms of the way I live. Making sure I have enough omega-3s. It's all of these different things. So it's diet. I exercise, or I try to exercise. I actually haven't gone on a run in a while, but I try to exercise. I try to do yoga, and I try to do all these different pieces: exercise, diet, therapy, medication, to make a kind of a holistic recovery plan. And I feel weird when I say this, because this is exactly what I hate, or not hate, but I dislike about the current trends in mental health recovery. It's like, oh yeah, just do some yoga and go for a run, and everything will be better. Like, your life is great. Hang out with friends, and it's not that easy. But when I do get in, and I definitely break patterns, like I haven't been really doing them as of late, until the last few days. Last week, I was like, okay, I need to refocus on this because I can feel myself slipping. So it's definitely not like one and done for me. I'm still learning, but I think it's become the bigger piece, the next step in my recovery, in the sense that, all right, before I had no idea I was bipolar. Now I do, and I took medication, and that didn't work, or that didn't quote unquote fix me. So what else can I try now? Oh, like looking at behavioral therapies, different types of therapies. There's more than different types. The doctor that I may be seeing. Looking at, if I'm feeling bad on these days, I do a big thing, I think, which I highly support, and I think everyone with a mood disorder should definitely do, is mood tracking. So I track my mood every day. I typically have like a set for, morning, midday, afternoon, and then evening. And I can say, if I was feeling bad in the afternoon, what was I doing that made me feel bad? I can say, like, you know, most times if I have a dip in my mood, it's because I didn't get enough sleep. I had been going out and eating a lot of sugar, or something happened. Not, I wouldn't say traumatic, but something happened that kind of brought up the feelings of trauma. So, for example, Naya Rivera, who was the Glee star, who passed away, and so much more than Glee star, but she passed away tragically earlier in July from drowning. She was with her son. Obviously, I didn't know Naya Rivera, but I was significantly, when I heard about that, significantly impacted because of the son piece. And I was like, oh, the mom died and the son was there. I think he's 4. It was just very, it hit me in a way that I didn't think it would hit me. So it's aspects like that I think I need to keep track of, in a sense, in like my mood journals. So it would be like, okay, why am I feeling bad? Because before I would, that's why I went in before I was diagnosed. I had no idea. I was like, I shouldn't be depressed. Like, everything in my life is fine. And then I learned that there's these things that I would have never even noticed. Like, I wasn't thinking that hard about her death. I didn't know her personally, but then all of a sudden it was everywhere in the news, and that's why I had been feeling sort of like a loss there. I was like, why do I feel this loss? So looking and discovering it, and I was able to do that simply by looking at the journal, my mood tracking journal. Mood tracking is also super important because you're able to forecast moods, or at least some people are. I am. I try to only speak personally from my personal experiences, but I can forecast, what's going to be happening lately. I can see, okay, I've been kind of rising these last few days. And that's because I've been maybe drinking more or going out on the weekends. That's typically like what happens. It's exactly what happens all the time. But I can see that now, and it's documented, and it helps get me back to a stable.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. So what I heard, like the key pieces: self-care, good sleep, proper diet, all of that is critical. And mood tracking journal. So this is critical as well, and therapy. And that's exactly what I wanted to ask you about. What kind of therapy? Because for some people they try different types of psychotherapy and it works for them. For other people it's hypnotherapy. For others it's behavioral therapy. So for you specifically, behavioral therapy worked the best, right?
Yeah, that's what I've been in for the majority. I've done a few I've done a few group therapies as well. I've done art therapy. I've done a few of them, but behavior therapy for me really has been the most impactful. And I think for people with attachment um, problems, it might be one of the most impactful ones. I think right now I'm also trying to do eye movement. It's EMDR therapy. I believe that's what it's called. I forgot the actual acronym, but it's specific for trauma and
Is it
opening up about,
like with eye movement?
yeah, the eye rapid movement desensitization
Yeah,
and reprocessing. That therapy,
for
and
sure.
it's really good, or at least I've heard it's really hard to like find the doctors, but that's a whole nother problem. It's really good for people with PTSD and other traumatic experiences. So like I said, a lot of these are involuntary responses. I don't even realize like why I'm feeling these emotions and where they're tied to. So I think that's the next step, is looking for that. It's looking into that. How do I identify what I don't even know yet? And it's definitely something that I'm interested in. But no, the behavioral therapy, the cognitive behavioral therapy, that allows me to change my actions directly. So if I'm having trouble with somebody, and when I say trouble, I mean it can be as simple as, it just sounds funny when I say it out loud. As simple as me emailing people at work and telling them that I'm late for deadlines, because like that to me is like losing an arm, and I'm not joking. But so I will literally have sessions on that and talk about how, okay, the behaviors to sort of put that in place. Because beforehand I would just kind of not say anything and kind of just like get really small and hide, and just let them come to me, slash maybe this is before I was working, but essentially I wouldn't deal with it. So now it allows me to take baby steps. Not maybe don't say all at once. Hey, I don't have this turned in, or like I'm running late on this deadline. Maybe schedule a meeting with them, or just do the baby steps at first to work up to that larger issue or the larger problem you need to tackle. Because without putting in concrete changes, which I'm still struggling to believe, because things have changed greatly, but like it feels like they're moving at the same time very slowly. Once you put in those changes, then they become habitual in the sense that you'll continue to do them. At least that's what they say. But I am trying them, and it has worked for a lot of different things. I think that there are still behaviors where I'm trying to enact in myself that I still have feelings over. So anxiety, like initial anxiety of letting people down, canceling plans, or having to reschedule something, or me if I'm not emotionally up to doing something. I still have an initial, they're not panic attacks, but they are anxiety attacks. I still have that kickback involuntarily. Like I'm like, okay, I'm having one now. This sucks, but like, this is what's happening. And I've been putting in behaviors to sort of fix that, and it's been getting better. It's been getting better. They're not panic attacks anymore, but they're still anxiety attacks. So it is a process. And it does get better, but I think you just have to realize that it takes some time.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. And previously, like earlier, you shared that one part of when you hear others talking about the recovery with mental illness, the one part that you don't like was where they say, "Oh, it's just simply like do yoga, do some exercises, do that, then do this, and you'll be fine." And I wanted to go a little bit deeper in your personal mission, because your belief is that our personal and communal stories are essential in the fight to dismantle the stigmatization of mental illness. So, is this what you don't like? Is this a part of this stigmatization, like this stigma of mental illness? Can you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I think that kind of goes back to I've always felt this way, but specifically when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I was diagnosed and I was told I had it, and that was about it. And I understood it a little bit from like a seventh grade health class, but it wasn't um, great information or anything to me. Sorry, it wasn't profound information. And everything on Google when I did researching, or when I tried to Google like what does a manic episode look like, or how do I fix like having like a panic attack, it didn't really talk about the feelings at all. It just gave very shallow like mania is when you're elevated and you're like more elated, and that's about like what it gave an example of. And there was a few. Reddit was very helpful because it gave personal stories, personal testimonies, but that's what I was looking for. I wanted to hear how the college student like me at the time was dealing with manic episodes, or like how people were actually dealing with these things. Because when I go to a mental health account, and I don't mean this isn't to shame anyone's advocacy at all. I mean, I love inspirational posts and I love everything that's good and feels good. But when I'm in my deepest depression and everything sucks, me being told that it gets better, like in a post on Instagram, as being that's what I Google, that's what I find when I'm Googling things, or like what I just told you, I do yoga and I eat better and I do all these things. Like that's not what I want to hear. Like that's not nearly, that's like that doesn't help me at all understand anything. So for YouTube talking about, I talk about these things, but I also talk about how, I don't like doing them all the time, slash I don't want to be doing them all the time, but I know that I need to be doing it. So how I work through that dissonance, I'm actually going through that right now. Like I said, I haven't really been running or like eating the best, but on YouTube, I've been talking about, okay, guys, this is the feelings behind that. This is like what I'm doing to try to move past it. But it's hard, and I'm not always doing it perfectly. I think that when you're in your deepest, darkest depression, I would want to say, everything does get better in the end, but at that specific time, my advice to people on YouTube is just that, you have to hold on, because I know that feeling, and nothing fixes that. Like me saying like it gets better in time, like it does, but that's not going to help you then and there. And I don't like when people act like it does, because mental illness is not pretty. It's not like fun. I mean, it's not like, mental health is a very good thing. Everyone has mental health. We should all support it and get mental wellness. But mental illness, different from mental health, different from mental wellness. Um, Illnesses, the disability, it's tough, and it shakes lives. It shakes futures. Um, it's like not a pretty thing. So, and it's been dressed up, and in my belief, in the last few years, as this trendy, hip new thing that people love. Brunch on Saturday, and we talk about our feelings, and that's like our mental health session. It's like, okay, yes, I love that, I'll do that, but my mental health session is also like the hospital, the literal hospital, because of other things that have happened. So
Yeah.
that's what I was looking for. That's what I wanted to hear. And when I found sort of those people who were talking about that on Reddit, a few on YouTube, I was like, yes, I want to know, what do you do? Like, how are you feeling? Are you feeling this way? And it's amazing to hear people's responses. I'll talk about something that I think that like I'll think that I'm the only person who thinks this thing, and I think that I'm going crazy. And then someone will say, literally verbatim, I feel the exact same way. And it's the most comforting thing just to know that. I mean, there's no advice being shared necessarily in the sense that like you should do this, because just knowing that someone else is living it with me in a sense, or through online, it feels like good support. Especially when I see people who are coming back, reoccurring people who are saying like, oh, this is an update on what's happening here. This is like a tip that I found. But no, I totally understand what you're saying, and just validating feelings. I think having empathy and validation and validating others is what's missing in the current climate. And that's the way to sort of break down that stigma. The stigma around it is, people don't understand it. I mean, I didn't understand bipolar disorder. I thought I did, but I didn't really understand it. And being able to talk openly and honestly about it is the only way that we can do that, I believe.
Yes, and I love that you share your experience, your knowledge in that on that subject from your personal experience. That is the biggest value of that is that you've been there, you've done that, you've experienced those feelings that so many people around the world are going through, and it has so much more value than some average college professor who read so many books on the subject but didn't experience it himself or herself. So that's why I see that what you're doing with your YouTube channel, with your Instagram, has a tremendous value for the world. And so thank you for that. And for people who want to get to know your story better and follow your journey, where do they go on the internet to follow you?
For sure. My website is currently under construction, but it will be revamping. I'm hoping by 2021 in January in winter. But they can find me youtube.com/Juliuss. That's Juliuss with 2 S's at the end. They can also find me via my social links. So primarily, I engage with a lot of people on Instagram, either through just like posting, sort of how I post on YouTube, or people will actually DM me with either just saying thank you for your video, or they'll DM me saying like, hey, how did you deal with this, or like, hey, like I saw you talking about this, I actually have some tips for you. So you can reach me via Instagram. It's Don Juliuss, and that's Juliuss with 3 S's, only because 2 S's was taken. But I think that is the piece that I enjoy, is reaching out and connecting with people and realizing that mental illnesses and mental health is a spectrum, and everybody is different. Everyone has different experiences, but we also have a lot of the same experiences, and we can help each other. If the healthcare system here, well, at least here in America, isn't like up to snuff, but I'm not sure. There's only a few countries that have it, like have their stuff together. If they're not going to do it, we have to come together, and sort of help empower each other. How can we help each other get better? Because at the end of the day, these are services, and we are the customer. And if we're not, satisfied with the care that we're receiving, then we have to speak up and say something about it, and share, what we're going through. Just because I've had doctors tell me things about medications that like, oh no, that's not true. Like, this medication's good for you, and I'm like, no, I'm throwing up, or I'm doing like this is killing me. I'm telling you how I'm feeling, and they just won't listen. And it's such a weird feeling, because it's like I'm living through it. What do you mean? So I love the connecting with people. So for sure, I'll connect with me online.
Wonderful. Juliuss, thank you so much for this amazing interview. And yes, so people follow Juliuss on Instagram and YouTube.
I would love to hear from y'all. /welcome everybody.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.